We are your home theater and AV questions answered. This is AVRant. Want your home theater or AV question answered by Tom and Rob? Send it to question@avrant.com.
Here comes someone else, Corey B. Corey B asks, 5 years ago, he had a dedicated home theater in his basement, but now he has moved and recently finished his new basement. The downside is that his theater area is no longer a dedicated room, and for aesthetic reasons, painting everything black or a super dark matte color just isn't in the cards. He's using a BenQ HT 1075 projector, and for the sake of cost and ease of installation, he painted his front wall using bare tinted primer, slightly gray for his screen, with a dark brown surrounding the screen area. Cool. He'd like his image to pop more. It's possible that he's just grown accustomed to an awesome projected image. Maybe it still looks as good as it ever did, but he just isn't completely satisfied. So he doesn't want to install a fabric screen, since that might also require him to readjust his ceiling mounted projector, and it's all just a bit too much cost and hassle. Gotcha.
Yeah.
So in terms of improving the screen itself, he'd like to know if there's an easy paint choice or a specific mixture that he should use. How about that?
Yeah, so this is a tricky one because I believe what's going on here, he had previously this dedicated theater that he was using. It sounds as though maybe it was blacked out or really dark in there. He was describing having like what they call a shadow box around the screen, which is where everything for somewhere in the range of 1 to 3 feet in front of the screen is entirely black, on all sides, top and bottom of the screen. And that does increase your perception of the contrast. It also makes sure that when light hits the screen from the projector, it scatters off the screen, reflects off of whatever surfaces, ceiling, walls, floor, that are around it, and then makes its way back onto the screen. The light reflects around the room and eventually makes its way back onto the screen, which washes out the image a little bit. Now, I mean, he sent a few photos of what his image looks like when he turns all the lights out, and you can see that the walls are being illuminated by the light that is reflecting off the screen. Still looks like a very, very viewable image that's actually on the screen.
I mean, that picture makes it look gorgeous.
It looks fine, but you'll even notice in there that the black bars are slightly visible. This is a 2.35 to 1 image. It's not as though those black bars completely disappear. But then again, he's using a BenQ HT 1075 projector, which is amazing for the price, but it's not as though it has JVC black levels at 6 times
he
the
could
cost.
make some little pull down masks manually and just kind of some black velvet and just kind of pull them down when it's time for 2.35 to 1.
I mean, that's it's not really the black bars that are bothering him. It's just I do genuinely believe you aren't seeing exactly the same contrast as you were in your old dedicated room, because you have these light colored walls. You don't have your shadow box around your screen anymore. You are getting a more washed out image. That is probably just a fact. So as far as the screen paint goes, we've mentioned before the Sherwin-Williams, they even have a paint color that is exactly called gray screen.
Gray screen, there it is.
Which is a very, very neutral color. Now, you can also just get their, if you have one that's called titanium white, that is always a completely neutral white. But if you just get their basic white paint, that can work. But it's tricky because I really don't think the issue is the screen itself. I think even if you took a fabric 1.0 gain screen and put it in this room, you would still have the same effect, which is that you are getting a slightly washed out image from the walls and ceiling and that around you. So really, you only have a couple. I mean, if this is super important to you, you only have a couple of genuine solutions here. One would be to alter the room in some way to lessen the reflections that are making their way back onto the screen. The only other solution is to get a screen with some gain, because a screen that has some gain, what it does there is it doesn't evenly reflect the light. It reflects more light back towards the center of the screen. So light that's coming from the side, in other words, bouncing off the sidewall and coming back onto the screen, that light is reflected less brightly to your eye than a perfectly, 1.0 gain Lambertian diffuser type of screen. So a screen with some gain, I'm not exactly sure how you would get that with just standard paint that you could buy at a store, because once you start going for a glossier type of paint, you just get hot spotting. You just start seeing this bright spot on on the screen from your projector, and that isn't what you're after. So there is, of course, screen goo, but it's not cheaper than just getting a silver ticket screen.
Right.
A silver ticket screen is less expensive than getting screen goo. So I'm sorry,
Yeah.
I don't have a super good solution for this. If
It sounds to me like the solution is some negotiation about what you can do in this room. Can we talk about dark curtains or fabric somewhere to help reduce the amount of light bouncing around? Some room treatments or something that have dark fabric. Can I paint a little bit darker? That maybe it's time for negotiation.
Yeah, because I mean, you can't prevent the slight washing out of the screen that's occurring in this room without altering something, and just changing the paint on the wall isn't really going to do it. You kind of have to have a screen time. I mean, you could, if you want to go insane, you don't need to do this, but if you want to go insane, you can go for like these black screens that are meant for high ambient light. Those really start to reject, or these ones that even have like louvers in them so that only light from certain angles even makes it. But that's an extreme. But honestly, what you need here is like the normal choice would be like a Studio Tech 130 from Stewart. That's a very expensive choice, but that's like a 1.3 gain screen. Something with some gain to it is kind of what you need.
Just coat the entire room with carbon nanotubes and you're fine.
If you could do that. I mean, of course, the alternative there is getting a projector that's even better, one that is brighter and has deeper black levels. That will increase, the perception. It could also be the case that the bulb in this thing is starting to dim.
That's possible too.
You said that's like 5 years ago that you had this dedicated theater, so it's not impossible that the bulb is just starting to dim and it's not quite as bright and contrasty as it used to be.
That's possible.
So
I've had times where I unhooked equipment and hooked it up either differently or in a different place, and things just seem different. And it's not as good. What happened? And I don't know if much happened.
Yeah, so that's actually kind of his next thing.
Yeah. So I guess we sort of covered this, but he says since he can't change much else at the moment, are there any simple things like settings in his projector, AV receiver, or sources that he could adjust in order to improve the picture? Well, you could sure calibrate things, at least with like the Disney disc or something.
Oh yeah, the Disney Wow disc would be a great way to do this. And there isn't anything wrong with adjusting to taste. If you want to set the contrast a little bit higher, if you want to set the black level a little bit lower, if you want to boost the color saturation a little bit more, you are free to do that. I would start with a nice setup disc to get you in the ballpark of accurate to begin with, and then adjust to taste. You could do that for sure.
It is so expensive. Like I said earlier, dude, you can't be a slave to those numbers.
Yeah.
If you like it better, slightly different, then make it slightly different. It's your home theater.
But I couldn't give you something generic that's going to overcome the little bit of washing out that I think you're seeing in this new theater versus your old theater.
But definitely calibrate. I would say definitely get the calibration disc.
Yeah.
And run through that one time. On the audio side, he's using all NHT speakers, including the ST4 towers with an SC1 center. Is that center too small for his new setup?
Well, we can sort of see this if you're looking at the photos on the YouTube video. Now, the size of the center speaker is not what's important. It's whether or not it can play loud enough at your seating distance. I will say right away, it looks as though, I don't know if this is a final setup. He might have, just placed things and snapped a picture. But if this is your final setup, it looks as though the center speaker is a little bit recessed on the stand below the screen,
and it looks off-centered as well.
That's why I think
speakers.
Maybe this wasn't the total final setup. You know what I mean?
Or maybe he's trying too hard to cram that tall subwoofer in the corner.
Could be.
And so it's shifting his two tower speakers. So I immediately noticed that it's not perfectly centered.
But whatever the case, make sure that your center speaker is at minimum flush with the front of that table, or even just very slightly proud of it. Because you don't want to have an immediate reflection coming off the top of the table that is in front of your center speaker. It doesn't look like he's sitting tremendously far away. NHT speakers are very good speakers, very solid speakers going back. These are a little bit older model, but they're very solid speakers.
There's nothing about that arrangement and distance that says definitely that's too small of a speaker.
But I will say this looks like a pretty darn hard, flat, reflective room. It's a larger room, so like you're definitely getting some reflections off of what is your right wall versus what looks to be more open space to the left. So you're kind of in need of some acoustic treatments here. If you're, say, having some difficulty understanding dialogue or something like that. I don't know what his complaint of his center speaker is currently, but if he does have a complaint of it and it's, say, dialogue isn't quite as easy to understand as I would like, is it really a matter of the center speaker isn't playing loud enough? Because that's all changing your center speaker might be able to do. I think you might have some acoustic issues with this room, just being that it's hard and flat and reflective, and that
There's
right
a
wall
lot
is
of
there and the
reflective
left wall
surfaces,
isn't.
yeah.
Yeah, this looks hard and flat in here. So yeah, I would err on the side of thinking, again, it's more your room than the speaker itself. You could get a much larger, louder center speaker in here and still have trouble understanding the dialogue if that's the complaint, because
That's
I think
probably
it's more the acoustics.
Or maybe he just snapped that picture and went, that looks like a tiny speaker.
Comparatively.
And he got worried. Like, is that going to be all right? It looks really tiny. But, you know, that, yeah, the more I look at these pictures, the more he needs to hang some kind of absorptive panels.
Yeah, if you can get some dark panels that even look like decorative.
That helps the light, too,
Yeah.
I'm saying, negotiate, man, negotiate. One more question from him. His receiver is the Onkyo TX NR 3008. He has a 7.2 speaker setup, and he'd like to know which listening mode we think is best for upmixing 2-channel content.
Yeah, so just a little bit older AV receiver, this one. So it doesn't have it doesn't have Atmos, of course, doesn't have DTS Neural X, but it also doesn't have what ended up being my favorite upmixer of all time, which is sadly gone now, which was DTS Neo X. Didn't have that one.
Why was that your favorite again?
I just liked the way it sounded. It
Okay,
didn't change the timbre of things. It really made nice use of front wide speakers, which have disappeared now.
I know.
So I liked that Neo X a lot, but this the 3008 didn't have that. It does have Odyssey DSX, but I was never a fan of that one. It never sounded quite right to me. So honestly, this is a THX Ultra 2 certified AV receiver. I liked the THX listening modes. The THX listening modes to me work nicely if you turned off re-EQ. And re-EQ, in the most annoying decision ever made by anyone ever, automatically turns itself on every time. Now, like, you might be thinking, I was just listening to something in the THX listening mode, and I just powered everything down, and then I powered everything back up. I didn't change sources. I didn't switch inputs. I changed nothing. Re-EQ will still be back on just because you power cycled. You have to manually turn the stupid thing off every single time. I hate that. That's an annoyance.
That's very bad.
I do like the THX Ultra 2 listening modes. Now, THX Ultra 2 will be based upon some other upmixer. So I would just use Dolby Pro Logic 2X. That's the one that's going to get you to using all 7 speakers. So Dolby Pro Logic 2X under the THX Ultra 2 listening mode. I would actually suggest using the game mode.
The game mode. Yeah.
For everything, which I know sounds strange, but the game upmixing modes aim to have the sounds be more discrete in each speaker. So the movie upmixing modes tend to make things actually a little bit more echoey. They tend to like echo the sound a little bit in the surround channels. And the music ones usually try to kind of blend the fronts a little bit, like expand the center speaker into the sides. The game mode tries to keep it basically discrete from speaker to speaker. So that's actually my favorite one. So THX listening mode, using Dolby Pro Logic 2X as the upmixer in game version.
I noticed one time watching an old 2-channel program.
Yeah.
It was about outer space, right? And one of those, it might, like you just said, the movie mode tends to add a little sort of echoey effect to it. I think I liked that more one time. It was the DTS movie mode.
Oh, yeah.
And I liked it more for that program because it sounded a little bigger.
Yeah, like always.
It lent itself to the program material, you know?
You play with anything and go with what you like the most. But as far as a recommendation, that's my...
In that case, I did because I was like, ooh, that sounds bigger, like outer space. So I liked it for that. Otherwise, I left it on the music most of the time.
Want your question answered? Send it to question@avrant.com. This is AVRant.
Now go out and listen to something.